So I'm here with Mike Hamer, and he's a model railroader in Ottawa. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your railroading?
Well, I got into the hobby. It was a result of a classroom project. We were celebrating Canada's 125th anniversary, and a little boy in the back of the class shot his hand up and said, "Mr. Hamer, wasn't it the railroad that brought the country together?" And I said, "You're right. Maybe we could build a model railroad in the classroom." That's how I got started in the hobby, and within a few years it developed to the fact that to the point that I was building a layout on my own with the help of friends. And I used to go camping in New England when I grew up in Montreal. I loved the landscape there, so I chose to model the Boston and Maine because I had seen pictures in the books and magazines of locations I'd actually camped nearby, and I remembered the maroon and gold of the train engines. At the time I wasn't into model railroading at that time, but it left an impression on me.
Yeah, so you managed to take that dream and make it a reality. You're working in HO scale, I understand?
Yeah, HO. To me, it's a scale that's got a good heft. I have enough room. I have a small layout. It's 11 by 13. Many modelers would probably go in scale with that size, but I'm quite happy with how the layout operates in the room. And you'll see an interesting concept in HO in a small room we call surround staging. I stage my trains, and the staging isn't out in a furnace room or out in the main lounge area. It surrounds the layout within the confines of the 11 by 13 room. So HO scale can be accomplished even in a small layout.
So tell me a little bit about your operating scheme. It's rather unique. You don't use car cards or anything like that, so maybe you can tell me a bit about it.
Well, they have switch lists. So when I call a train crew, there's train orders if you're running the long mainline freights, and if you're doing switching in the town, you have the switch lists. So we've skipped one step. The conductor in the caboose would have taken the waybills and sorted them out and written a list as he's sitting up in the buggy, as the Boston and Maine calls the cabooses or the caboose. So we make the switch lists, but that's done already for you. So you're just handed the switch list, and I find it's quite easy. I always have crews of 2 running the trains, and that makes it more not comfortable for someone who's new to the hobby coming to a train operating session.
Well, thanks, Mike. Let's go have a look at that layout.
Sure.
So, Mike, this is railroad here has really progressed to the point where it's nearly completed. I see there's lots of fantastic scenery and cityscapes. Can you tell us a little bit about how you design some of these structures, because they don't look like they're right out of the box?
No, sure enough, Chris, I find that any structure out of the box, if you put it on the layout, everybody else in North America has the same kit on their layout. If you take a look at this industry over here, I bought 7 or 8 DPM Loeb linen mills, and I took all the structures and built up the wall sections to create Scodris grocers and Wingate wholesalers. And of course you put vines on the sides of the wall to add a little bit of personality to the structure. A lot of the signs right on the brick I put on myself using the type of lettering that you can just burnish off, and you can see some of the bar mill signs up top. There's one building that stands out in my opinion, and it's this building over here. That was a craftsman structure, kid. It was one of my first craftsmen. It was still in plastic, and I remember I had a well-known modeler visit my layout, and he looked at the layout and he said, "Mike, you've got a beautiful layout here. By the way, who makes this structure here?" So that told me that certain structures stand out because of the quality of the structure. But you can have fun making urban scenes from a lot of the kits. You kit bash them, and you put 1 or 2 types of kits together and have a lot of fun with it.
I noticed that the structures, that none of them are the bare plastic. You put a lot of paint on them to make them look realistic, I guess, eh?
That's right. And also a lot of weathering. And this is the town of North Dover, and I wanted to create the effect that it was in a valley with both sides of the town rising on both sides. So in the background you see structures like these. They're still only 3 or 4 stories tall. However, I've put them on little pieces of wood out from the wall. You don't see the pieces of wood they're resting on. To you, they look like a 7 or 8 story structure. So just a little modeler's trick. I also angled my streets here, so you see some of these buildings on angles, and that helps create a little bit of depth to the scene. If I had put my roads parallel to the main line, my perpendicular roads would then go right to the backdrop, and I'd have to paint that forced perspective. And I'm not the best painter in the world, so I figured I'd trick the eye by angling my streets instead.
It looks terrific. I also see that there's a lot of greenery. The foliage is quite interesting. How did you do that?
Well, most of the trees are made from the flowers of shrubs in my garden. This is hydrangea. I just take the little flower off the hydrangea plant, and I'm not damaging the plant at all. In fact, I'm encouraging its growth for another year by removing some of the deadheads, if you will. And I take the armature, I dunk it in a bowl of glue and water, or an ice cream tub of glue and water, and then I sprinkle on Woodland Scenics ground foam. Take my hobby knife and clean out all amongst the trunk, and it looks like the natural wood. And these are actually natural trees because they are made from nature. We have spirea, hydrangea, and some sedum as well. And Chris, I find in the urban scene, the trees help soften the vertical edges of the buildings, and they just soften it a bit. It makes it more pleasing to the eye.
So Mike, here's an interesting river scene. I noticed that there's very interesting water techniques that you've used. What did you use to create this water?
Oh, when I made this, Chris, I used Envirotex, the 2-part epoxy resin, and you have about 3 or 4 hours to work with it once you mix it. And I painted the basin black to give depth, and I filtered in some sand off on the edges and had a little bit of brown paint, and I mixed the black and the brown when they were both still wet. If I painted black, let it dry, and then add the brown later, you'd have a line, whereas there's a blending. So it creates gradual depth as you get to the center of the river. In this scene, the river is only about an inch lower than the rest of the surrounding area of the layout, yet it looks like quite the river chasm. So you can have a lot of fun creating rivers on your layout.
I noticed that there's some wood structures over on this side too. This is probably when you started to experiment a little bit more and go beyond the styrene.
You're right. This structure here was my first scratch build, where I'd seen a photograph of a building jutting out over the water with some decking around, and I thought that looks really cool. So I had seen it in a video. I stilled the video and then just did a sketch of the building as the video was stilled on my TV screen, and from the sketch I just started to build it, board by board construction. And you can see that there's 2 decks at different elevations this is the Legion Hall in North Dover as it hangs out over the river.
Fantastic. I see in the background it looks like there's a whole bunch of kids getting out from school.
That building is the most precious building to me on the whole layout. This is an exact replica of the 2-room schoolhouse I taught in up near the Labrador. Now, New England is nowhere near Labrador, but New England has a lot of clapboard buildings, so I wanted to have my first schoolhouse where I taught on my layout. So that building was built from a Cheerios box and a file folder, and then I got some Grant Line windows. So it was a lot of fun. You can build anything out of anything if you have the creativity and the mindset to do it.
Mike, I see that on the outside of what looks like the main part of the layout, there's another line of track that circumnavigates the room.
Yeah, that's my surround staging, Chris. And if you bring the camera in, you'll be able to look left and right, and you'll see trains staged. There's the Maine Central down there. There's a little stub end Boston and Maine yards here. And to your right, you'll see our passenger train will be coming into sight shortly. So 7 trains can be staged, and I have a few yards that can keep operators busy. I have on the layout about 25 locomotives and about 125, 130 pieces of rolling stock, all in a bedroom, a spare bedroom in my home down in my basement. This can be accomplished with the surround staging concept that my friend Trevor Marshall and I designed when I wanted to have this layout. I gained experience operating Michel Boucher's layout and a couple of other layouts in the region, and I saw what I wanted in railroading. I wanted long manifest freights, I wanted passenger service, commuter service, and interchange with a second railroad, and the surround staging concepts allowed me to have all that and more.